Okay, so the last video yesterday, I had gotten the 931 engine on a different stand, something where I could work on the back of the engine. And let's take a look because I'm going to keep moving on here. Got to. And I did get the rear main seal installed. That was with the kit, surprisingly enough, and no problems there. Note that while the crank has been kind of sitting around, I got a little corrosion because that was all cleaned up. But on the tail end, that does not matter. Hopefully I'm not experiencing the same thing inside of the engine. Soon I'll be able to get motor oil in there, and I've been putting lubricant on all the mating surfaces, that require it. So let's look at this orientation, because I believe right now the crank is at top dead center. The line on the crank is pointing that away, which to me, because the way the bell housing is with the viewing port, it would be pointing up. So I need to get things analyzed because there's several different marks, tick marks, on these 924 engines. I think there's one for the normally aspirated, one for the Series 1, and a different one for the Series 2 turbos. So here's the flywheel. I had this resurfaced like a year ago or more. And as I'm looking at it, you can vaguely see a 931 part number and a tick mark. So looks like they did a little bit of wire brushing here. I could probably do some more. So one would think that that tick mark should align with that one, but I'm going to double check Haynes and the service manual to confirm that, because I've already read some instances where people had put these flywheels on in the wrong orientation. Now, I thought on the ring gear that the sensor was just counting teeth. Apparently it's a little bit more involved than that, because I found what appears to be magnets embedded in one of the teeth. And it is a Hall effect sensor from what I understand. So that's what it's counting. And I would imagine there's a proximity, a gap between the sensor and that. I looked at the parts diagram. There's actually a shim associated with that sensor. I don't know that I ever saw one on this engine, but let me do some reading, some more evaluation. We'll take a look at the bell housing and how all this kind of lines up. And hopefully this will be some useful information, because I don't want to put this flywheel on in the wrong orientation and the car not run properly. That would be a big problem. So I've confirmed that this tick mark on the flywheel needs to align with that tick mark on the crank. And just kind of looking at it, when you do that, right, because it's like at 2 o'clock there, 2 o'clock there, that puts the top dead center mark, should be in line with the opening on the bell housing. Now, we have a problem in that before you put the the flywheel bolts in, there should be a washer, basically a 5-hole very thin washer that goes over here. I think when I looked, that is no longer available. So that's a problem. I also need the pilot bearing that goes in here, which I planned on replacing that anyway. Throwout bearing. Yeah, that needs to be replaced. Of course, the friction plate, the pressure plate, which actually the only thing I'm finding is a spec. Probably do a stage 2, you know, because it's good for street and autocross and actually less expensive than stage 1. Go figure. Guide tube's probably okay. I reviewed the video when I pulled the bell housing. I had a lot of problems with the pin for the clutch fork. It's got some mild indentations. I could probably get rid of those with a little bit of fine sanding. Otherwise, it's not too bad. I've seen them a lot worse where those, you could feel those. I mean, I can barely feel those with my fingernail. So we'll look at that. The clutch fork, of course, is unique to 931. It appears to be in pretty good shape. Where you see wear on the clutch fork is right here where it pushes on the throwout bearing. These needle bearings, I'll replace those. Those are available. Doesn't have a cup bushing like the 914s do. So that's kind of interesting. So that's it pretty much. This bell housing stuff it's pretty simple. I need to refresh my memory on how the pin is secured. That's interesting. There's usually something that holds that in there, but I'll look at that. So, you know, just a couple of things. Oh, here it is on this side. Yeah. So there's a 6mm bolt that goes in there that secures the fork pin in place. No big deal there. You know, other than cleanup, I think, you know, and parts. So, I mean, you know, once this is all said and done, it's probably going to be about $1,000 for the friction plate, pressure plate, throwout bearing. I'll try to salvage the pin. Needle bearings for the shift fork. Needle bearing for the crank. For pilot bearing, actually. And I don't know what I'm going to do about this washer. I know it's here in the garage somewhere. I can't find it. So everything may come to a screeching halt. I can do some cleanup on the bell housing. That's going to be about it for now. So there you go. So I cleaned up this shift fork out of the 931, and you can clearly see the part number there. But I happen to have another shift fork on the shelf out of a 944, and guess what? It's got a 931 part number. Same part number. However, it's a different casting number. I think this one is 2042 maybe, whereas this one is 141. So I mean, dimensionally, they look identical to one another. So point being is, if you were to break your shift fork or have excessive wear on your 924 turbo, you could seek out a part. I believe this is from a normally aspirated 87 944. maybe. Because I think the turbo cars have a 951 part number, and their shift fork is different. Because I know Turbo 944 definitely has a different bell housing. So anyway, that was interesting. I took some 400 grit and worked on this pin quite a bit. It helped a lot. Also, just kind of fooling around. I cleaned up those needle bearings, and I mean, it's not bad. It's pretty smooth. The cages appear to be intact. I mean, they're inexpensive. I could probably reuse those, put some good clean grease in there. But I don't know. I found the washer plate that goes on the back of the flywheel. DC Automotive supposedly has one. So I ordered that and some other little bits and pieces just to get the order up to $50. That's our minimum. So yeah, I don't want to use anything else besides what's called for inside. I thought about doing wavy washers, but I don't know. That's a lot of little loose bits and pieces inside of your clutch. So I don't know. Again, probably going to come to a screeching halt without parts. Was looking at the spec clutch and needle bearings and throwout bearing. And that order is pretty substantial, so not sure when I can pull the trigger on that. Have to take a look at finances. Well, I did find the cam belt cover, and amazingly, the grommets and the bolts that go with it. Now, the grommets are a little toasty, so I've backed it up with some fender washers, just to kind of sandwich that sheet metal. And it works okay. I mean, it's solid. And I'll probably have to take it off again, but I haven't had that cover on since, I don't know, I took it off like when I first started working on the car years ago. So I was just amazed to find, I knew the cover was hanging around, but the hardware, I didn't think I would find that. So that's a win. So now we got this alternator and compressor bracket. And I don't know that I've ever seen a part with so many rubber grommets. It's crazy. They're like everywhere on this part. Here's all the hardware, and I cleaned it up. So I'm gonna trial fit all that. It might have to come off when I drop the engine in, but you know, again, this is a great way to figure out what parts I'm missing, and that way I'm just getting closer to getting this thing together. Okay, so I know the alternator, it has this bolt, which is kind of a crazy arrangement, and I'm not sure why the head of this has been ground off. It's supposed to be a long caps bolt, but it's got 2 bushings, 2 concave washers, this special sleeve right here, all this business going on, and all that is for is when you put your alternator on, that casting fits in that slot, and then when you tighten it down back here, right, it's going to compress all that together. That's reading right now, it's just loose, and when it compresses, that bushing will expand, or at least that's the theory. Bottom line, if it doesn't catch right there, I can put a fender washer in there to kind of capture it. And then of course you got the adjusting bracket that fits on here. So that's pretty straightforward. And then these mounting points have got to be for the AC compressor, right? And then this little guy, another rubber mounting point. I'm pretty sure that does a crossover tube for coolant. That's what that's all about. So yeah, there's a lot going on that one bracket. It's kind of crazy. Yeah, and it's a 931 part, so it's unique, one of a kind, unicorn. Well, here it is, a week or 10 days later, and DC Auto emails they do not have that washer that I ordered from them. It showed online available for the flywheel. It's that big metal plate with holes in it for these flywheel bolts. So I'm just going to make one. I mean, I got some sheet metal. I think I got some nice thin stainless, and I'll cut it that diameter and drill the holes out and be done with it. I'll also have to cut a hole in the middle for obviously that's where your shaft on your transaxle tube, torque tube shaft penetrates into your pilot bearing. So I'll have to do all that. But here's what I did get. I got these cool motor mounts from Vibratech, I think it is. Vibratechnics. They're in the UK, right? Ordered them online. I actually screwed up. I got one set from an eBay vendor and another set directly from the manufacturer. So I'm going to have a set available. So yeah. Now I'm not sure. I guess these will work on NAs, normally aspirated 924s. They're really your only option, as far as I could find, for replacement on 924 turbo. So yeah, pretty excited about them. And I will confirm when the other set comes in, and maybe try to provide a link to Marketplace for somebody that wants them. Because I don't need 4 motor mounts, but it looks like that's what I'm getting. But it's kind of a moot point at the moment because I need to get all the clutch stuff before I can even worry about mounting those and getting this engine ready to install, because we're getting close to that. So today's all about fabricating that plate, and we'll see how that turns out. Okay, so I found a jar lid that was about the right size. Yep. Scribed out stainless steel, very thin sheet metal. Put it over the opening, taped it down, flipped the flywheel, marked out the areas that need to be cut out. Okay, so the stainless steel sheet metal is 0.025. I think that's pretty similar to what the original part is. And so basically I drilled it out, the bolt holes, with this hole saw, which I really like. And then of course the pilot bearing hole was much larger, so I drilled it out as large as I could, and then I followed up around the edges with this die grinder. I actually did it with the plate just like this, kind of fixed in place with the loose bolts, and just kept going around it and walling it. You're not going to grind that flywheel. You'd be hard pressed, because it's a lot harder than this stainless steel sheet metal. So, you know, and then I took it to the bench grinder and got rid of burrs. And so I think it'll work okay. I mean, when I get the pilot bearing, that'll tell the story. Well, the hole for the pilot bearing is much smaller than this hole. So that's, even if it's a little bit large, it's not going to impede putting in the pilot bearing, I don't think. So I'll double check now that I'm talking about that, whether you should be able to install the pilot bearing with the flywheel in place. Should be able to, because I'm pretty sure it seats in this bore, not in this bore, but I'll double check that. Also note that I marked, there's a couple of letters there, because you know, you got that orientation, that tick mark for the orientation of the flywheel, which would be buried under, I guess the original part has a little hole cut there. What's probably going to happen is someday that is going to show up here in my shop, and I'm going to go, oh my God. So I think this will work fine. It's, you know, it's so lightweight. It's not, even though it's imprecise and sort of a hack job, it's not going to change the balance or anything of the motor. At least that's what I'm running with for now. Well, this is not going to work. That sheet metal is too thin and pliable. It's deforming as I torque down the bolts. It's 65 foot-pounds is the torque spec. And I don't want that inside of my clutch spinning around at 6,000 RPM. So I'm going to abandon this, and I'm just going to find some good thin wavy washers to go under these. I don't think it's going to be a clearance issue with the friction plate, which let's take a look at that. Here's the old one. So there's a friction plate under there. Stand by. So that should be the mating surface on the flywheel side. Yeah, you can see the springs and everything on the friction plate are pretty much flush. So as long as those bolt heads aren't sticking out beyond that surface, it's okay. So wavy washers will work. In fact, probably could do just a standard flat washer. You know, that's going to be the main thing. Those, as long as those flywheel bolts don't stick up and hit that spring, should be okay. Looks like, I don't know, I'll put a straight edge on it and we'll see how much room there is. So yeah, you can see there is plenty of room right there for washers. So yeah, I mean, for that matter, it could be a lock washer, just as long as it's probably not more than you know, shoot, that's a good 5 millimeters at least, 4 at least. So okay, that's plan B. All right, quick trip to Tractor Supply. 12 millimeter flat washers. I think we're good as far as depth and clearance on the friction plate. So I like this much better than trying to fabricate that big plate washer thing. So shouldn't be a problem. And I did check on the pilot bearing. That can go in. There's a version 1 and a version 2. I know when I sent the flywheel to the machine shop, they extracted the pilot bearing and returned it to me with the machined flywheel, but I can't find it, of course. It's probably wherever that big washer thing is, somewhere in this damn shop. Anyway, so I don't know which series. I would suspect it would be series 2, you would think, because this is an 82, but that's what I'm going to order. It looks like they're available. That and all the other stuff I need to do the clutch. So that's going to be a big ticket. Maybe a couple weeks before I pull the trigger on all that, but this is just an update. I'm glad to have the flywheel on the engine finally, and there'll be more to come. Thanks for watching.